Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Some Christian Guy, and today I've got a provocative subject, as you would have noticed from my intro. Tommy Robinson and the Beast Power. Now Morgan, what in the hell are you talking about? Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Tommy Robinson is a British activist who's been active for about a decade or so now, and he's been very, very vocal about a lot of the political stances in the EU and in the UK specifically, where they are allowing, without restraint and without expectation of integration, people to just come in from the Middle East and so on and so forth, and to basically settle in such a way that they refuse to integrate, and they're being, how can you say, it's a political tactic whereby you import as many people of a different ideology and a different culture as possible in order to create a large enough voting bloc, so that, and if you manipulate that voting bloc, then that voting bloc is able to sway elections to political parties that have certain ideologies and so forth. And his specific thing has been specifically against Islam. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm not particularly interested whether you agree with his methods or whatever the case might be. I'm not interested in that. I think fundamentally what he's doing is a necessary thing, personally, although there are some ways that he goes about things that I know wouldn't necessarily endorse. So there's a bit of a, it's, how can I say, my like for what he does is contingent on a couple of things. I don't fully endorse the way he goes about everything, but nevertheless, and one of the big things that he's been interested in is the fact that political correctness has gotten so absurd that in certain places in the country they have had Islamic rape gangs, grooming gangs, sex slavery gangs develop, and because the British police and government are so afraid of being called racist, they turned a blind eye to the trafficking and grooming of women in the UK for sex work and prostitution of all different kinds and things of that sort. And this was allowed to go on for many years, 7 years, and it was all over the news and all that sort of thing. Now, we need to understand that as far as Islam is concerned, Islam as a religion, we're not talking about the Middle Eastern people, so this is not a race thing. We're talking about an ideology. Islam as an ideology has a very, very different idea of how to treat women, specifically women who are not Muslim, than what we do in the West, specifically Christians, right? The idea, this idea of equality with women, that women have the same worth as a man, the same moral value, the same autonomy, mental autonomy and stuff like that, is completely and utterly foreign to that particular religion. And as a result, and especially their attitude towards women, the Islamic attitude towards women that are not Muslim, right, is that the only thing that a non-Muslim woman deserves is to be a sex slave. She's no better than a dog. All right. So when you have these Muslim rape gangs and sex trafficking gangs going on, right, they believe fully, right, that this is perfectly legitimate, that there's not a problem, and that is the only thing Western women are good for. This needs to be properly understood, right? And so as a result, this particular gentleman, he was wrongly, because he's since been released about a year ago, He was thrown into prison because he was actually reporting on this this issue, because that whole gang that was involved in the whole rape issue, right? The whole trial was still going on, and he was reporting on it. And freedom of the press is not as free in this country as it is in the US. And he got basically put into prison on some trumped up charges, and was thrown into solitary confinement for 2 months. Right, imagine that, 2 months in solitary confinement. That's rough. And as far as many people are concerned, the only reason, because here's the thing, he was actually targeted for assassination. That was the intention, to throw him into prison. And there's a very, very large Muslim demographic in prison, and the intention was that he was going to get taken out while in prison. And a lot of people suspect that the only reason he was actually not killed whilst in prison is because there was such an outcry, not only from the British people in general who support him, but such an outcry from foreign nationals, foreign political parties from the US and from Europe, and some foreign politicians and delegates actually came to visit the UK and spoke out on this issue. And so then that's what they believe prevented him from getting assassinated, because they knew that if he got assassinated, they were basically going to turn him into a martyr. And ever since then, and this is why I want to go with the Revelation thing, because I'm focusing on what's happening to this guy as a general principle of what the beast power. So as Christians, we're very concerned about end time prophecy, but also what the beast of Revelation does, who it is and what it does. So as a result of this gentleman being concerned about his country the way he should be, any patriot would be concerned about their country. And if you're a country where you believe that people have the right to speak the truth, even if you disagree with freedom of speech, you, at least everyone on a fundamental level, believes that a person should be allowed to speak the truth, right? And he's doing that, right? And very well, to be honest. He knows his stuff on these issues, and he's been gagged, and he's been thrown into prison, he's been ostracized. And he's all his financial, a lot of these people have gone after his financial well-being, right? So his PayPal accounts have been shut down, his websites have been shut down, and all that sort of thing, where the media, right, and the government have basically gone and to basically crucify this particular individual, to make it impossible for him to buy and sell and basically have any kind of life unless he bows to the ideology that the system wants to enforce upon the people. And in this particular documentary, ladies and gentlemen, you need to go watch this documentary, where what he has done. Now there is a news agency called Panodrama, and Panodrama, in cahoots with the BBC, went out, since he has been released from prison, went out to do a documentary which was basically titled Tommy Robinson to taking him out. That's essentially what it was. The documentary was designed specifically to expose, inverted commas, Tommy Robinson as a hateful, far-right bigot who wants to incite violence and all these kinds of things. And what he did, this was very fortuitous for him as an individual. Panodrama, in cahoots with the BBC and in cahoots with a far-left group called Hope Not Hate, right? Hope Not Hate sets themselves up as an anti-fascist activist group. And here's the thing, right? There's always a political connection. They advise the UN. Okay, now you must know, as soon as the UN gets involved or is involved at all, you need to be suspicious, because it starts to stink of globalism. It starts to stink of globalism, and we've spoken about globalism already If you watch my videos about cult behavior, we've already spoken about globalism there. Now, Hope Not Hate and the BBC and Panorama. Now, Panorama is considered like the gold standard in producing documentaries and stuff. Basically, if Panorama does a documentary on anyone or anything, the general population takes what they say as gospel, right? That's the kind of power and influence they have. So if these guys choose to go after you, right, you're screwed. Okay? So in this documentary, Tommy Robinson Exposes managed to get footage of how the journalists, right, that were involved at the BBC and involved with Panorama were going to people that knew him and offering them money, threatening them, right? So bribery, threatening them, right, as well, to lie and fabricate stories, right? For example, they approached this one woman and offered her money and also threatened her and said, we want you to make false allegations of sexual misconduct on him in order to create a Me Too, right? So this is where this whole Me Too movement stupidity comes in, where the Me Too movement is designed to be weaponized and against people that the establishment, that the globalist elite want. If they want to bring disrepute on you, all they do is get some woman to concoct a story, to lie, basically concoct a story in order to discredit a particular individual, and this was caught on camera. Now, fortunately for Tommy Robinson, the woman who was approached by these people and offered money, was bribed, she actually went to Tommy Robinson, told him what was going on. Then they gave her a hidden camera and microphone, and she went to the meeting with these journalists and recorded the whole thing. So I'm going to put the link in my description. You need to go with, you really need to go and have a look at this, because then Tommy actually goes ahead and eventually confronts the journalists and stuff like that. So you can see that there's basically this conspiracy. Now the BBC is a government institution. The government's supposed to be impartial. It's a government institution, but you can see that these people have made it their mission. There's this conspiracy to silence this guy, right, in a very big way. Now, what does this have to do with Christians? What does this have to do with the beast of Revelation and all that kind of stuff? And that is a very good question. Now, as Christians, we understand a couple of things, right? We have Revelation, and everyone knows about the beasts of Revelation, right? So, and the end time prophecies and all these kinds of things. Now, it needs to be understood. I can't get into all the details, so I'm going to assume for the most part that you know more or less what I'm talking about. So even in Revelation, not only in Revelation, but in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, it talks about these beast powers. Now, this is all symbolism, right? This is symbolism, this is prophecy, this is typology, right? A beast in the Bible, when it's talking in prophetic terms, a beast represents a king or a kingdom, right? So a beast can have horns, for example, and the horn is a symbol of power. It's a symbol of a king or a kingdom, okay? So in Daniel, you have 4 beasts, right? Each beast represented a specific empire in time, in history, right? So you have the beast that looked like a lion and had wings, right? That was Babylon, and the Bible says this was Babylon. So Babylon at those times, the prophet Daniel was living in Babylon, and the Bible comes right out and says that this beast represents Babylon. And then the Bible also says, it prophesied that Babylon would end and another power would come in. So you have another beast which represented Medo-Persia, the Medo-Persian Empire, which then also expanded. And this was the bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. And then after that, right, was the Greek Empire, right? So you had the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great. That was the leopard, okay, which had four heads and 4 wings. And there's some historical significance there. So for example, when Alexander the Great died, there were a few generals fighting over Greece, and it was eventually, and so Greece, the empire, but Greece specifically, was divided into 4 sectors, which is why there's 4 heads on the beast. So you had 4 different kings, as it were, and one body. So 4 heads on one body. So you had the Greek Empire as it was at that particular time, with 4 people, 4 generals specifically, that managed to get some influence and some power. And then after that, you had a beast which was stronger than the 4th beast, which was stronger than all of them. And then we know that that represents the Roman Empire, as we know, the Roman Empire under the Caesars, and that was the most powerful empire, and so on and so forth. And what we read in the Bible is that this empire never ends; it merely changes form over time. So the beast that we are specifically concerned with was not only existent in the Roman Empire itself, right, but exists even till this very day. Okay, and then when you get into Revelation, right, so this is where I want to get into. So when we're talking about globalism, right, the beast changes over time. So before, it was merely a localized empire, the Roman Empire, right, where it was all the way to North Africa, into parts of Asia, and basically the whole of Europe, and so on and so forth, up into the UK. So you have Hadrian's Wall, and so on and so forth, and that was the empire. But now the Bible is quite clear that this beast is eventually going to rule the entire world, right? So this beast goes from something that is local to Europe and sort of North Africa, and is eventually going to be a global superpower. So the Bible is actually prophesying. So when you hear all about this globalism, the Bible is talking about globalism here, right? Because here's the thing, the how can you say, they say satanic elite, as it were, your Illuminists, your Freemasons, your Fabian societies, your all of these conspiracy sort of people at the top, they are actually religious in nature, what a lot of people don't realize, and they're wanting to reinstate Babylon. So Babylon, if you read in the Bible, you look at the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was the first great humanist project, where God's instruction was, go out into the world and be fruitful and multiply, but spread out into the world. But the Babel project was, no, let's unite into one city and build a tower in which we uplift and magnify ourselves. And this was the project of the elite, this great humanist thing to elevate human beings up to the position of God, rather and so defied God's order, that rather than spread out, they preferred to establish the civilization in defiance of God. And the globalist elite want to repeat that, want to do the same thing. So God confused the languages. So God was the author of all the different languages we have today. And you see that globalism wants to eliminate national divisions, national identities, right? Wants to eliminate that, wants to eliminate borders, wants a one world currency, wants a one world religion, wants a one world sort of super state, and all these kinds of things. Everyone in this wonderful globalist utopia is what they want, and then with a few little people in control at the top. This is essentially what they're wanting, the exact same thing, right? And so all of these, like EU, UN, and now it seems like we don't know when it's going to happen, but we've heard rumor of what they call the Amaro, where they're going to unite Canada, the US, and Mexico all under one sort of super state sort of thing. So that's another globalist thing, and it's going to, they're wanting to consolidate everyone under one homogeneous sort of thing, which is why they push multiculturalism and all these kinds of things, so that if the cultures fight with each other, and this is the thing, all of this fighting and between the races and between cultures, they are doing that on purpose, because eventually everyone's going to get so sick and tired of the fighting that they will give up They will give up what makes them unique in order to accept the homogenized globalist vision of having everyone basically the same under one government. And that's where it's going. The Bible's talking about globalism here. Now, here's what we need to sort of have a look at, right? So I'm going to go through a quick verse here in Revelation 13. So let's go to that quickly. Right, Revelation 13. So we have here, right, 13 verse 13. It says here, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Now, again, this is more symbolic language, right? When we're talking about fire, right? When the Bible talks about fire in a symbolic sense, fire is another word for doctrine, right? Doctrine, ideology, right? So when we're talking about false doctrines, well, the Bible, you hear the Bible talks about a strange fire and stuff like that. So here it's talking about a system that's going to bring fire down from heaven, right? It's going to bring about a universal doctrine, a mindset, an ideology, and is going to want to enforce this, and is going to bring this down in the sight of men, in sight of everyone on earth, and is going to want to enforce this ideology upon everyone else. Do we see this happening? Absolutely, we see this happening, right? So that's what it's talking about. If you decode the Bible, and all these things are in there, I'm going through it for the sake of brevity. Now, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth. So the point is to deceive you, right? By the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And so it's talking here, what the Bible is talking about here is there's a relationship between two beasts. You've got the beast out of the sea and a beast out of the earth. Now, for the sake of brevity, I'm merely going to state it. This can be looked at somewhere else. The beast out of the earth, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as a lot of people are concerned, is the USA, the United States of America. And the United States of America is given a certain power in order to make the whole world worship the beast out of the ocean. So the beast that came out of the sea preceded the beast out of the earth, right? And we know that Europe, as a supra entity, precedes the USA, right? We are familiar with this, but we also know who established the US. It was Europeans. Right? It was Europeans that established the US, and what a lot of people don't realize is that Freemasonry, Jesuitism, and so on and so forth, that was what established the USA, right? It wasn't proper, true Christianity. The USA has never been an actual, true Christian nation. It was founded on Enlightenment, a lot of Enlightenment principles, sort of mixed with Christianity and all that kind of stuff. The founding fathers were not all Christian. They were deists. They were all kinds of things, right? And this is very, very important. And when we talk about things like freedom of speech and stuff like that, these are not as great on the surface as we think they are. And so those were the principles there. Now, the Bible talks about the beast out of the earth. The US is given power, right? Saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, right, which had the wound by a sword and did live. So, right, so these miracles are basically these great things that this beast is able to perform, and we understand that the US, right, and the US imperial project, we know that the CIA is always involved in other countries, toppling governments, setting up new regimes, toppling regimes, and so on and so forth. And they're always saying, we want to spread what? Democracy to the world. So they're setting up an image. Here's this image of this ideal way that the world should be, and we want the world to adopt Americanism, as it were, right? And they want the world to adopt this liberal ideology and all of these doctrines to give it to the world. And we see that, right? We see that everywhere, okay? The US is constantly interfering in the affairs of other nations all the time, through whether it's through outright military intervention, where they literally go in with the military and cause all kinds of issues, like we see in the Middle East at the moment. That's not by accident. The First World War, the Second World War, all of these things were not by accident, right? They're not by accident. These things are planned. There's a reason why these things go on, right? They're not just the random occurrences of history. It's not the case, right? They're planned, they're orchestrated, and there's a purpose, right? So, and I'm going to show you here, it says here, the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. So it's referring to the beast out of the sea, and we see in another place that the beast that comes out of a sea, we know that at some point in history, one of its heads was wounded, right? And the wound appeared to be a mortal wound, but then it tells us that the wound was eventually healed, okay? So we'll get to that. And it says here, and he had the power to give life unto the image of the beast, right? So basically to really bring it into people and make it a force for change in the world, right? So the ideology takes on a life of its own, in a sense, right? That the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So when you sufficiently indoctrinate people to believe that something is right, you as the instigator no longer have to be actively involved. Once people are indoctrinated, they will run off and they will spread the doctrine on their own, right? Believing that it is correct. They've been deceived that it is correct. So we know that globalism, environmentalism, all of these activisms, social justice, environmentalism, globalism, the democracy, all of these kinds of ideas, this ideology has completely taken on a life of its own, completely and utterly, so that for the most part, the people behind the scenes, all they need to do is just allow these things to play themselves out. People marching in the streets, people picketing all over the place, people doing YouTube videos, right? All kinds of things. The whole thing takes on a life of its own. Okay? And we're seeing these things happen today. And what do they say? It says, whoever does not worship the image of the beast should be killed. People often have, not often, the vast majority of people, even Christians, do not realize what worship really means, right? Worship is not this pious bowing down and groveling and stuff. Worship is to be in awe of something, is to emulate something, right? So when we worship God, it's not about sitting in front of a wall and, you know, or whatever the case might be, bowing down and groveling and stuff. Worship is the act of if something inspires awe to the point where you want to not only uplift it, but also want to emulate it and spread it around. That's sort of the act of worship, right? When you want to emulate something, right? So for example, we talk about sort of celebrities that become idols, for example, right? And how do the people worship these idols? By wanting to become like them, okay? They give up themselves for something. And we see this, right? Someone that's popularized it quite a lot of late is an individual called Jordan Peterson, and even Jordan Peterson himself, strangely enough, is actually a part of the problem, because he still spreads libertarian ideologies, enlightenment ideologies, evolution, and all these kinds of things. That's still part of the problem, but he at least has recognized that people have become so ideologically possessed that their own personal identities are subsumed by the ideology, and they go out and they're even willing to be violent. So it says here that whoever does not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So if you think about people like Antifa is quite willing to go out, put on balaclavas, and go and literally demolish and beat people up in the streets. They would act, if possible, I believe they would go out and actually kill people. And you see, if you look at the Tommy Robinson issue, right? The whole issue is they tried to assassinate him in the whole reason they put him in prison is because they wanted the people to get a hold of him and kill him in prison, right? Because he's not sucking up to the globalist, the media ideology that is being put forward, right? They wanted to wipe him out, and since they couldn't do that because it would look a little bit suspicious, they have now produced. They are going in collusion with activist groups and BBC, which is funded by the government, which is funded. Not only is it a government institution, but it's funded by you by purchasing your TV license, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a Christian, if you are a person of goodwill, stop paying your TV license. But do it legally. You can do it. You can go onto the BBC website and you can fill out a form where you declare that you don't need a TV license. So don't, but then stop watching that rubbish because it's indoctrinating you. Okay, that garbage, right? I don't watch television. Okay, I don't. I refuse to watch television. I do not have a TV license, so I don't watch anything from the BBC. But I refuse to get Sky, Virgin, all of these kinds of things because it's absolute rot. It's rot. It demolishes your brain. It's disgusting. Absolute garbage. And I travel for work a little bit, right? Every now and then. And so it means I'm staying in a hotel. And when I'm in a hotel, there's always television stuff. So I usually pop the television on for a little background something because, you feel a bit alone or whatever. And it's just nice to have something in the background. And because I don't expose myself to television at all, right? When I do see the television on, sort of sitting there in my hotel room, I can scarcely believe how demented the programming is. It is not only designed to mentally retard you, but it is designed for the most abject. The programming is designed for stupid, ignorant, low thinking people. It is unbelievable. It's stop watching television completely and utterly for a month and then try and go back to it. You won't be able to. You won't be able to because you will realize how absolutely degenerate the whole television and stuff like that. And we need to understand when we look at like Hollywood, and let's take the BBC. We know how corrupt it is, right? We know, for example, Hollywood. To take an example, how much pedophilia goes on in there, how much sexual abuse goes on there in Hollywood, right? We have this Me Too movement and all that kind of stuff, and everyone's it's like, really, were you surprised that people are being raped and abused in Hollywood? Really, right? But what they don't realize is that the Me Too movement is a distraction so that people don't focus on what's really going on in Hollywood, right? It's like a controlled burn, right? It's like throw one or two people under the bus so that the population thinks that something is happening, thinks that things are improving, but meanwhile the occult, the hidden system of sexual abuse and pedophilia and satanic rubbish nonsense that's going on in Hollywood with the elites continues going, right? And if you look at the BBC, for example, the BBC, we know, covered up and pedophilia, right? With Jimmy Savile and all of these pedophilic idiots all over the place and stuff like that. That they eventually, it came out that yes, they were sexually abusing minors and all that kind of stuff. There is a statue outside. Let me see if I can. Let me find it here, right? It wasn't typing. Right, the pedophile sculpture and the image in front of the BBC broadcasting house. So there is, right, the thing. Have a look here, right? Just have a look. Let me zoom in nicely here. Right, look at that. A guy, with a little kid. The kid is naked. This is a pedophile molesting a child. All right. Let's see if we can find the name of the individual. Here we go. Right. Here it is. This, here. Eric Gill not only slept with his children, but sculpted directly onto the Portland stone outside Broadcasting House in midwinter, wearing a smock and no knickers, and BBC secretaries were commanded not to look up as they went into the building. So, this guy, Eric Gill, who is the guy that did this, right, we know that he was a pedophile, right? He was a pedophile. He sexually molested his own children, right? He had an incestuous relationship with his sister, and he practiced bestiality, right? They actually have his diaries, right, where he's writing stuff that's so disgusting that I can't even repeat it, and I'm not entirely sure I would recommend that you go read his diaries. But he was a degenerate of the highest order, and when the Catholic Church actually found out about him, even the Catholic Church, which is like got pedophile stuff all over the place, right? Even they sort of either took down the statues or covered them up, right? The BBC knows that what the statue is about, that it's a pedophile statue, and they refuse to take it down, right? So you know that the people behind that BBC, behind the massive mainstream media and all that that these are the most dodgy people on the planet. And if you take the most higher up people in the world in media, you can trace them all back to secret societies and all this occult stuff all over the place, right? So, here. Should be killed. Now, here's the verse 16. And he causeth all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and bond, right? So he doesn't, this is going to impose it upon everyone. No one is to be spared, right? To receive the mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. So here's what it means. It's not a barcode, okay? The mark of the beast is not a barcode. It's not talking about a literal physical mark. It's talking about ideology. The beast is going to force you, right? These are symbols. The hand is a symbol for what you do, your actions that you take, and your forehead is a symbol for what you believe. Now it says either a mark on your right hand or in your forehead. This system does not care whether you agree with it and go along with it, or if you go along with it because you're forced to. Doesn't care, right? Or if you go along because you believe, it doesn't care. It's going to force you, and when you accept the ideology, and so you are receiving essentially the mark of the beast, the mark of the system, if A, you go along with it because you believe it is correct, or even if you disagree but you go along with it anyway, you are essentially receiving the mark of your beast, of the beast, and you are culpable, right? And this is what globalism is trying to do, is trying to move people towards, and how it enforces how the globalist system is going to enforce its will upon people is going to become more and more and more extreme as time goes by, to the point where they're going to institute blue laws where they are going to force more, they're going to actually legislate morality even, okay? So this is going to get really, really heavy, and these things are already happening, by the way, right? Already happening. So in the UK, for example, there's a gentleman by the name of Count Dankula, right? And he was arrested for making a politically incorrect joke. A joke. He's a comedian. He's actually pretty good, right? He was arrested and he's been dragged through the courts for the past 2 years as well. He made a politically incorrect joke, and he's been completely demolished by the media, by the political system and all that kind of stuff. Completely taken out in order to support a particular ideology. Right, totally wiped out. I feel sorry for the guy, but if only they knew why this is happening. Because they just think, a lot of these people, if they don't have prophecy, they just think that it is again, they just think that it is the coincidences of history, right? They don't realize that there's a final end game here that they're working towards, right? Although a lot of them are beginning to cotton on to the fact that there's this globalist agenda that's trying to force everyone to think and behave in a very specific way, right? Now, but I am being by no means exhaustive. There's a lot more in here that there is to be brought out, but this is just a general sort of thing, how the principles carry out. A lot of Christians need to understand that the beast, it says here, all, both great and small, both small and great, rich, poor, free and bond, etc. It's nowhere here does it say that it's only going to do this to Christians and is going to leave the Buddhist alone, that it's going to leave the atheist alone, that it's going to leave the Hindu alone. It's going to do this to absolutely everyone that does not toe the line, even the atheist. All right, so we mustn't sit here and think that just because the atheist or the whatever, anyone who's not a Christian, that it's happening to them, that this is not prophetic, right? That it's only prophetic when it happens to us. Nonsense. It's going to happen to everyone. Wants to subjugate the entire world, not just Christians. Okay. And it says here, so that no man might buy or sell unless save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So unless you toe the line, they are going to destroy your reputation. They are going to destroy your means of your means of being able to make a living. So with Tommy Robinson, they shut down his PayPal accounts, they shut down his websites, etc., etc., right? Same thing with Count Dunkula. They've shut down a whole bunch of stuff of his so that he's actually struggling to make a living and all these sorts of things. They will go after your bank accounts, they will go after your job. So they will write, they will actually, so like this activist group, Hope Not Hate, they will actually put together a report and they will contact your employer in order to get you fired if they decide, right? This is how unregulated it is, right? There's no due process. If Hope Not Hate decides that you are a right-wing extremist fascist, they will put together a report and they will phone your employer. They will harass your employer to fire you. And it's actually happened. You will see it in this video where Tommy Robinson actually interviews a gentleman who, because of this activist group, lost his job as a result. So that's how this all is going. And here we're talking about this is the beast out of the earth. So it's not only Americanism here, right? It's setting up Americanism is creating this image of the bigger beast, right? The one that came before, the beast out of the ocean, this image that everyone should worship it. It's just the ideological means by which this is thrust onwards. And we all know what happens in the US happens everywhere. It's just one of those things, right? Because they export. And this is where corporatism, right, this whole free trade and all this corporatism, this capitalism goes in. Because if America can export their products, not only do they export their products, but the ideology goes over with their products, right? And that's how it all works, because you get the corporations work together with governments, work together with, and you see this, right? The three devils, right? You've got corporatism, the state, and the sort of the ideology, the activism, sort of almost the religious sort of thing going, and they team up and they go and they spread their poison around the whole world. So everywhere you go, there's feminism. Everywhere you go, there's LGBTQ, whatever it is. Everywhere you go, you are not allowed to speak. You can say whatever you want about Christianity, but you're not allowed to say anything. You can go to prison if you say anything against Islam. You get called Islamophobic and all that kind of stuff. You get called a racist. You get all these kinds of things. It's unbelievable. You can say whatever you want. You are allowed to be as racist as you want today, in the world today. Right? So basically what they've done is they've taken, so once upon a time, it was perfectly acceptable for you to be racist against black people. Right? It was back in the old days during slavery, you could be as racist as you wanted to against black people, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. And if black people spoke up about it, then they'd get beat down. Okay. Now it's just been flipped on its head. Nowadays, you can be as racist as you want, as absolutely racist and sexist as you want against a white male, right? And there is nothing he can do about it. Absolutely nothing he can do about it. It's, in fact, racism against white people is encouraged. And everyone else becomes like a little protective group. They can do no wrong. You're never allowed to say anything, as if the only evil ones are white people, right? And we know from the Bible that everyone is evil, everyone is fallen, everyone is sinful. Now, let's talk about this beast here, right? We need to understand, right? This is a little bit earlier on in the chapter. So here's the beast out of the sea. And I stood up upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. So this beast is rising up out of Western Europe, okay? So we had the collapse of the Roman Empire, right? And at the collapse of the Roman Empire, we know that Europe was then split into 10 states, okay? So I stood up upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the 10 horns is the fact that there was 10 kingdoms that rose up. You had your Gothic kingdoms in Europe once Rome had fallen, right? Had 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. So these are the kings, right? We know we're talking about kings here, and we're talking about old Europe. But here's an interesting thing. It's only got 7 heads, right? Now we know that so it says, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. So it took blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, right? So this beast is an amalgamation. So earlier on I spoke about you had the lion, the leopard, and the bear. So this beast is an amalgamation of the previous ones as well. It's like it's a chimera, right? Was like unto a leopard, his feet were the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. So the Bible tells us that the driving force behind us, the reason why this is successful, is not merely because of the power of men, but it's because of the power of Satan that is driving this, is actually empowering. So Satan and his angels are driving this issue and is giving it this ability to be this global power. All right. And it's got 7 heads, so it's like a chimera and like a hydra. So here is a picture of what a hydra looks like. That's what a hydra looks like, okay? It's got many heads, right? And if you cut off one head, the other heads are still functional, and so the animal can continue doing what it wants to do because it's got more than one head. And if you look in the mythology, often if you cut one head, right, the head can grow back. Not only does it not kill the beast, but the head can actually regenerate, okay? And the only way to kill the hydra is if you actually get it in its actual main body. So a lot of people, when they see certain institutions fall, right? For example, everyone was very happy when they saw the fall of communist Russia. But the fact of the matter is that communist Russia was only one of many of the heads of the hydra. The beast continued to live, okay? And so when we're talking about here, right, so great authority, and I saw one of its heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered. Here's wonder, right? Wondered after the beast. So the world's mind, the mindset of the world was in accordance to the doctrines and the worldview of this beast. Now, the head which was wounded here, this particular head, was the Catholic Church, right? We know that Napoleon, I think it was 1798, Napoleon took down the papacy as we know it, right? Took it down, all right? But does that mean that the beast dies? No, it does not mean that the beast dies. And we see here that later on the wound, the deadly wound, was healed. Why? Because the beast itself was not killed, because only one of its heads was wounded. Only one of its head. The other heads continued to grow. So whilst you had Napoleon come in and take the beast out, the globalist empire was still chugging on. So for example, we know that Napoleon's nephew, right, Napoleon Bonaparte, his nephew was the one who founded the FBI in the United States, for example, right? Because we know also that Napoleon himself was a Jesuit, was either a Jesuit or a Mason, one of the two. He was a member of the secret society. The beast continued to live in all the secret societies, the Illuminists, and so on and so forth. That system continued to go on, right? And the power that they're given to be so influential in the world and to do everything, to perform these miracles, as it were, right, to do all the things that they need to do, is driven by Satan himself, right? And people don't realize that in the final analysis, when these people, what these people are trying to do is to establish the kingdom of Satan in the whole world and subjugate the entire world under this particular power. So the Catholic Church in 1798 was dealt this deadly wound, right? But then the deadly wound was healed, and it was healed by Mussolini during the Second World War. Mussolini reinstated the Vatican state, and so now the Pope today is not merely the head of the church, he's actually the prime minister, as it were, or the king of the Vatican, because the Vatican is its own sovereign state within Italy, right? The same as the City of London. The City of London is a separate corporate entity, right? Separate from the rest of London, and it's the same with Washington DC. Washington DC is its own separate entity apart from Greater Washington itself, right? It's separate. These are the three global powers, right? The three heads, right, as it were, right? It's talking about one of its heads was wounded. There's at least three heads to this particular chimera, okay? So one is in Washington, the other head is in Washington DC, the other head is in London, is in the Corporation of London, right? And the other one is in the Vatican, right? And it ties everything together. It ties the military, it ties the financial. So Washington DC, military, London is financial, the Vatican is religion, right? And that's the beast. Brings it all together. Statecraft, economy, religion. And the whole world wandered after the beast. So after the Second World War, we started having things like the United Nations and all of these global... The First World War, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, the First World War and the Second World War were necessary in order for these people to establish global powers like the UN, etc., to oversee and to dictate and influence the world in every single thing that it does. Those things were absolutely necessary. And communism, for example, was necessary in order to prevent... So for one of the reasons that brought communism in is because the Orthodox Church, right, the East Orthodox has its origins in the Byzantine Empire, which was opposed to the West Roman Empire, and so that needed to be destroyed. The Eastern Orthodox needed to be destroyed, and communism was one of the ways that went about. So communism is an atheistic philosophy that is designed to go into a country, purge all religion, right, prevent any religion from growing, right, oppress the people to such an extent that they will eventually, when liberated, they will accept Western capitalist ideology and run with that liberal enlightenment ideology, which is just it's just the other side of the coin, is all it is, right? And this is how it is spreading these ideologies all over the world. both capitalism and communism are used by the same people for the same ends, right? Because both communism and capitalism, or should we say individualism and collectivism, were both part of the Enlightenment French Revolution issue, right? They were both there, and they were both being used, right? And a lot of people don't realize that communism was exported from the West into the East. Right, and they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So people look at this globalist system and they're like, it is so overwhelming that most people, it doesn't even compute to most people. They'll look at this and they'll be like, nah, it can't be true, right? You're just a conspiracy theorist and stuff like that. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months, and so on and so forth. So over here it's primarily concerned with the head of the beast which was wounded. So it's not talking about the beast in general. This one is talking specifically, and so we know that the Vatican that the church, that the Catholic Church was given had dominion for. So for example, if you take 42 months in prophecy, each month, each day is a year, and so 42 months is, you know, is X amount of, is 2000 something, 2450 years or something like that. So we know that's how long the Catholic Church had complete dominion over the Europe as an empire. And we know that that came an end not only during the Reformation, but also during the time of Napoleon. It was cut short, right? And we know, and that's one of the reasons why the Reformation was such a big deal, because the Reformation essentially ended the Catholic Church's ability to have complete dominion over the minds of people at large. Because the Reformation, though not perfect, what it did is it freed people up to think from themselves, rather than have a top-down dictatorship in the Vatican for people to believe their own thing, and read the Bible for themselves and see what's in there, and to realize these kinds of things. So that's what we have. Let me see, did I go through everything that I wanted to? Yeah, got all the bits and pieces there. So to summarize, Christians in general being very concerned with prophecy and all these kinds of stuff. I know my denomination, the Seventh-day Adventists, very, very interested in prophecy and all that kind of stuff. Yet, for all the interest that people have in prophecy and all these kinds of things, the vast majority of people do not see that these things that are happening to Tom, whether you like Tommy Robinson or not, right? Whether you like people like Count Dankula or not, or anyone else, regardless, when you see corporations like Facebook, like YouTube, like Google, right, like Twitter, banning people from social media, when you see the state arresting its own citizens for speaking out against multiculturalism and globalism, all of these things, arresting its own citizens, right, for speaking their mind, which you should be allowed to do, and all of these kinds of things, right? When you see Antifa wanting to shut down your ability to speak the truth, or your ability to speak your mind, and to try have a negotiation, and all these kinds of things, what you are witnessing before your eyes is the fulfillment of prophecy, fulfillment that the whole globalist agenda, the beast system of revelation, it is going forward whether you like it or not. And a lot of people these days, right, we see there's been this massive backlash as Donald Trump has come into his presidency. We are seeing an increased backlash to what people consider is this far left ideology, which stamps on freedom of speech and stamps on all these kinds of things, and they're saying this is all bad. What we really need is, let's go back to classical liberalism, let's go back to all these things. What they don't realize is that the return to classical liberalism is nothing more than a return to the very thing that made far left extremists what they are in the first place. Far left extremism is the logical conclusion, is the logical outworking of Enlightenment ideology. And if you are a Christian, you should have nothing to do with either the conservative right or the liberal left. You should have nothing to do with it, because they are both satanic ideologies that come from the same place, that come from the Enlightenment philosophy. Right? And the Enlightenment philosophers, they got those ideologies from occult religions that come even before. It's nothing but ancient occult mystery religion, all of it. And the tactics that they're using, the sophistry that they're using, right? All of it. You should stop funding the BBC, Hollywood, all the media. And what we take away from this as well, right, is, and this is the very interesting thing, when you watch the video, when you watch Tommy Robinson's video, you see how the journalist manipulates, right? Manipulates their sources, the people that they are trying to get things from, in order to spin a false narrative, right? And we see this in the media, right? So recently we had that idiot, what's his name? Jesse Smollett or something like that, right? Who faked a racist attack, and the media went all out, right? We had that other woman earlier on this year, right, where her young girl was shot in the car. I think it was on New Year's or something like that, and she lied. She said that it was a racist attack, that it was a white man that did it, and it turned out that it was actually two young black men. The media didn't care. They immediately went out and spun the racist narrative, and further attempted to divide and cause war between the races with this narrative. And that idiot Sean King, right, actually went so far as to release the image and the details of a white man that they accused as being the perpetrator, right? And people went after this guy, only to realize that it was false, right? So here's the thing: when you're dealing with the police at least are bound by certain laws when they're conducting things, right? So they have to read you your rights. They can't do things. They say don't speak to the police if you're not in the prison, if you don't have your lawyer present, and all these kinds of things. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand something. The media, the mainstream media, is part of the same corrupt system. The difference is they are not bound by the same regulations, checks and balances that the police are. So do not ever talk to the media, right? Never talk to them without your lawyer present. Conversely, if you don't want to do that, never talk to the media if you are not recording the conversation yourself, right? So that you can release the footage yourself. Because what the mainstream media does, and Tommy Robinson shows, he shows how the journalist was telling his sources that he was willing to cut and edit the footage in order to spin a false narrative, right? To spin a false narrative, so that rather than show the full footage to give the full context of what's really going on, they cut and edit the footage in order to mislead you into believing that something else entirely happened. And we saw that earlier this year again with those young boys, right? The young cat. Let me see if I can find it here. Ah. Right. The Covington Catholic boys, right? So let me find here. All right, so here we go. Right, so let me pull this up here. Right, the Covington Catholic boys. So you have here, right, this issue where these Catholic boys were out on a school tour, right? And now this was all caught on camera. And so what happens is, what the original story was, that everyone said this group of young white Christian boys, right, racist MAGA hat wearing Christian boys, went out and started harassing ethnic minority people, right? And the media chopped and edited the footage to make it look like these young boys were intentionally harassing and being racist towards ethnic minority individuals, right? That was how the media spun it initially, and the whole world went completely out of its damn mind, right? Because this young white boy dared to smirk, right? How dare he, smirking, the young little racist. Then what happened is they released the unedited version of the footage, the original unedited version of the footage. And what did we see? Right? What we found is that the boys were minding their own business, and it was actually black activists that started harassing them, shouting slurs at them, right? These Hebrew Israelite retards, right? These black Hebrew Israelite retards shouting slurs and stuff. Those morons tried to recruit me, right? Because I'm a native Latino, the black Hebrew Israelites believe that Latinos and blacks, that we are the original Israel. They actually tried to recruit me once, right? This one individual tried to recruit me, and I basically told him exactly where to stick it, because that is racist. That is racist. I outright reject and refuse to belong to any religion that wants to state that one race is the best. And you get the same thing. You also get the British Israelites, those retards who believe that the white people are the superior, the original Hebrew Israelites. And you get all this retarded stupidity out there, right? So this footage, once it was released, they saw that the media lied, that they edited it to look like something else. And what they found was that it was these black Hebrew Israelites who started instigating on these young white boys in the first place. And then this Indian activist, who's known to be a dodgy son of a gun already, that he approached them, beating his drum and carrying on like a stupid buffoon, as these people do, right? As these activists do. And what the young boys did was actually very admirable. They basically kept their composure, right? They just stood their ground. They actually started singing a couple of school motivational songs from their school, and then when their bus arrived, they boarded the bus and they buggered off, right? The young boy who's in the video, the one who got the main slack, has had such severe harassment from the left, from the extremist left, that he's actually now gotten to the point where he's gotten lawyers and he's suing the living hell out of all of the media outlets who knowingly falsified the narrative in order to go along with the mainstream media narrative that white people are this and white people are that. And this furthers the globalist agenda. They want white, black, Indian, they want the different races, the different natures of people to hate each other. That's what they want. And so, and you will see, watch Tommy Robinson's video, man. It's unbelievable. And your money, your £153 that you pay a year for your BBC, that garbage, is being used in corrupt, absolutely abjectly corrupt ways. It's a scandal. And now Tommy Robinson himself is getting lawyers to go after these journalists for the defamation and for the outright savagery of what they've been doing. So, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know as Christians. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say when the end is going to be. It doesn't give us a date. Let me tell you something. This is not far off. This is not far off, and you better catch your wake up right now and get your life in order. Right? Get your life in order. In fact, I would recommend to Tommy Robinson himself, right? Because there's a couple of things. He's a little bit, how can I say, he doesn't necessarily lead a clean life. So you know, he still drinks and he still loses his temper and things like that. And my best advice to anyone is try and lead as a composed Christian life as possible, because if these people can, and it's difficult because we all screw up, right? We all screw up. But these people, if they can find, because that's what they did, they tried to find anything in his life that they could use in the documentary to discredit him and completely utterly ruin his life. And ladies and gentlemen, you are seeing, right? So Christians, when this eventually comes, when there's this great persecution that's going to affect everyone, you need to understand we are already seeing what is going to be like. Now already. This is not some future thing. This is happening now. You better catch a wake up, because the beast system of revelation is gaining its strength. And this whole thing with, do not think that Donald Trump is not part of the beast system. Don't think it for a second. And I know a lot of people, conservative people, are going to want to rip my head off for this. He's part of that system, right? He's not going to reverse things that are anti-Christianity. Trump is posing, right? Because the Bible also, it talks in Revelation as well. It says that the power is going to look like a lamb, but it's going to speak like a dragon, right? Trump is pretending to be a lamb, but when he speaks, you will see, you look at his political party, if you look at the political situation, he's behaving like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon. You need to get, and you need to understand this. And it's coming. The massive issues are coming, right? We're seeing now with Brexit, with the collapse of the EU, with the rise of nationalism. This nationalism is not a biblical nationalism that's going on. It's an evil nationalism. It's not a good nationalism. This is coming problems. It's coming big problems. And but that's what they want. They want the war. They want the civil war, because war is how these things progress. Second World War was necessary for the globalist agenda. The First and the Second World War was necessary for the globalist agenda. The Cold War was necessary for the globalist agenda. All of it. Now the war on terror, same thing. The war on terror is nothing but a false flag event, right? Islam is being weaponized. We know that many Muslim people just want to get on with their lives. We know that. There are a lot of Muslim people out there who have no interest in any of the terrorist stuff at all. We know, right? But Islam, the faith in general, is being weaponized. Third world people are being weaponized in order to further the global agenda. And it's a pity, because not only is the Western people and European people going to suffer, these people, Africans, Asians, Middle Easterns, they're suffering as well. And we're all suffering for the same reason, even though we are suffering differently. It's part of the globalist agenda. We need to be aware, and we need to, Christianity, proper, biblical, primitive, traditional Christianity is the only way out of it. The only way. The only way. And many Christian denominations have, because remember, one of the heads of the beast is the Vatican, right? Religions everywhere, even Christian denominations. When you see Christians adopting social justice, adopting liberalism, adopting humanism, you know that these are lambs who are speaking like serpents, who are speaking like dragons, right? the false prophet is a Christian one, right? Christianity itself, in the perverted sense, right, is part of the globalist agenda, right? That's how it's going to corrupt the minds of Christian people. So all of this, you need to get rid of it. All the social justice stuff in the church, and everything that comes with it, the LGBT, the woman's ordination, all the different funny ideas of baptism, and you saved by grace, so you don't keep the law. So this all of this kind of stuff, you need to do away with it. Get it out of your church, and start waking up. Start waking up. The church has become lax, right? The Bible says the church is lukewarm. When the Bible talks about the 7 churches, also in Revelation, the 7 churches, it talks about Laodicea, the church of Laodicea. It was a literal church, but it also stands for a time period, a church period. We are now in the church period, which is Laodicea, which says that we are blind, dumb, naked, pathetic, idiotic morons, and we are lukewarm. We are lukewarm. And because we are lukewarm, the globalist agenda is doing whatever it wants, and it's getting away with it. And not only is it getting away with it, but we are helping. Many Christian churches and denominations are actually helping further the globalist agenda. And that's the big problem. So you need to ask yourself, right? What else does the Bible say? Choose you this day who you're going to serve. You're going to serve the beast power. You're going to serve God. There's no two ways. Unfortunately, and I know this is politically incorrect, you either serve the God of the Bible, or you're gonna end up with the beast power. It's that simple with the globalist agenda. That's what's gonna happen. End of story. There's no middle ground here. There's no middle ground here. And hopefully people who are cottoning onto the globalist agenda and all this kind of stuff will have a look at prophecy and see that the Bible knows what it's talking about, that prophecy is coming true, and they're going to realize it's coming true because there's a God who knows what's going to happen, who has omniscience, who has foresight, and can predict these things, because evil is predictable. Evil is very, very predictable, right? Evil, it's in evil's nature to be one thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, oh yes, oh, this beanbag isn't as comfortable as I'd like it to be. Thank you very much for watching, for your time, for tuning in. Subscribe and share if you found this valuable, if it helps you out. Pop your questions, drop me an email. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm full of it, hey, that's fine. Let me know. Let me know why. Make up your own mind. Make up your own mind. But let me tell you something. There's no reason for doubt. The evidence is out there. Where the world's going. The Bible's predicted it. We know it's going to happen. Right? Accept Jesus Christ today. Get in, because he's the only safe way. Not in government. It's not in activists. It's not in any of that. Jesus Christ, him alone, and he's going to keep you. And get right with God. Get right with God. It's the only way that you can save yourself, save your family, save your community. No other way. No other way. NGOs, activists, charity groups, not going to do it for you. Legislations, politicians, celebrities, not going to do it for you. Atheism is not going to do it for you. Right? Atheist ethics is not going to do it for you. I mean, there's an oxymoron if ever there was one. Atheist ethics. Right? Impossible. On atheism, ethics is impossible. It's self-contradictory. We're just animals. Right? Will to power and stuff. Nietzsche was right. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Take it easy. Hope you tune in next time. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much. And God bless. And cheerio. Bye.